Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gillian and I'm the chair of the Highlands and Islands Branch. And on behalf of myself and the lead person for this event, Gordon Douglas, I would like to welcome and thank you all for attending our webinar session today. With all the activity and attention around COP26 just now, there is an increased focus on what might be done to find new and innovative ways to reduce the human impact on this beautiful orb that we call home. Today, we are delighted to host Jonathan Lindsay, Operations and Technology Director at the European Marine Energy Centre, EMEC, who is taking time out from his very busy schedule to present to us on EMEC's green hydrogen projects. Jonathan is an experienced manager and subsea engineer who has worked in the oil and gas industry for 25 years before moving into marine renewable energy full-time in 2017. Jonathan has worked in multinational companies such as McDermott, Inc. and Wood Group, as well as smaller consultancies in the UK. Jonathan also chairs the BSI Steering Committee overseeing UK input to IEC wave and tidal energy standards. So today's session will highlight the hydrogen path EMEC has taken and a sample of the many hydrogen projects ongoing at present. A Q&A session will take place once Jonathan has finished presenting. So please feel free to add any questions to the Q&A section and we will go through them at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Gillian. So I now have to try and get the presentation up. There's always this worry that something won't work. If you can let me know when you can see it.
That's on the screen now, Jonathan.
That's on the screen now, is it? Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Gillian. I'd like to thank IOSH for the opportunity to talk to you today. I have been down in COP all week. In fact, I'm in Glasgow at the moment. And one thing that's being talked about an awful lot at the moment is hydrogen, and in particular green hydrogen. So my talk today then, just a very brief introduction, but I'll let you know who is EMEC, for those of you that haven't heard of us before, why we've got into hydrogen, and I'll give you a brief overview of some of the projects that we've been working on in the last 4 years or so. And then I'll try and bring together some conclusions of what we've learned over the period, and maybe a little bit about what we'll be doing in the future as well. So EMEC, we were set up in 2003 with £36 million worth of public funding from EU, UK and Scottish government. We are a not-for-profit organisation, but we are a limited company, so we don't get grants to run the operations. We have to stand alone and bring in money from where we can find it. And we are a UCAS accredited independent test laboratory as well. As we were set up by governments for the industry, we have this vision, globally successful marine energy industry as part of a clean energy system. And we are a kind of a mission-driven organisation. And it's all about saving cost, saving time, and saving risk in the marine energy sphere. So where are we? So those of you that don't know EMEC, we're based up in Orkney, which is a group of islands at the very north of Scotland. You can just about see when you look across from John O'Groats on a clear day. We have a full-scale wave site on the west coast, where we get waves up to about 16 meters on a good day. And then further to the northeast, we have our full-scale tidal site, which has up to 8 knot current running through the islands. We also have a couple of small sites for smaller prototypes. Our main office is in Stromness on the west, just about a mile from our full-scale site. It's in our research campus shared with some other small companies and Heriot-Watt University, who do a lot of collaboration with. We have a smaller site at Kirkwall at Hatston Industrial Unit that services the tidal sites. Alongside that, because we are a marine company, we have very close access to piers and docks for our clients to access the sites. And alongside all of that, there's a large supply chain that has been built up over the last 20 years to service the sites. So that might be high voltage electrical, it could be heavy craneage, survey, marine operations, diving, etc., etc. And then those companies have been able to export that experience to other parts of the UK and further afield. And it's all because we've had EMEC based in Orkney. So these are the two main sites. On the wave site, we call Billy a Crew. It is a 7 megawatt site. We have 5 11 kV cables out to the water, anywhere between 30 and 50 meter water depth. Then they come back into a 11 kV substation, and then that links into the SSE 33 kV substation, which then links into the national grid. So we are the furthest point in Orkney in the UK national grid. On the tidal site, which we call Follow Warness, we have 4 megawatt generation limit, and that 4 megawatts I'll come to later on in the presentation. It is quite a critical number to us. We have 7 11 kV subsea cables on our site, again between 30 and 50 meter water depth, and one of our clients has their own cable as well. And as I mentioned, we have a couple of small, what we call scale test sites, so there's no subsea cables there. It is just open water, but it's all consented for companies to bring their wave and tidal energy devices on board. And we support them with a test support buoy where you can put perhaps a microgrid or even a diesel generator or something if you need to kickstart the devices, or they can have a load bank to shed any electrical load that gets generated. And we have one for the wave site in Scapa Flow and one in the tidal site near Shappensea. We supply the clients with data relay and comms, and we also provide wave riders on the wave sites so that you can match the size of the waves to the electrical output. And we have current profilers on the tidal sites to do a similar job. The wave riders are there constantly, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Current profilers, we tend to go out for a month or two at a time, just because they're limited by battery. So why do they come? Main things are looking at how to install in the first place, how to survive once they're in, and as I mentioned on the wave side, it can be anywhere up to 16 meter waves, and 8 knots on the tidal side. They've got to be reliable because they're going in the water. You don't want to keep bringing them ashore to fix them every couple of months because it costs an awful lot of money to do that. Anybody who's worked in the marine services side knows that boats cost a lot of money. You've got to be able to maintain them, and you've got to be able to operate them. So that is knowing when you can switch on the generators. Is there a maximum wave that they need to work in? Is there a minimum wave? And it's the same with the tides as well, particularly as obviously the tides will be changing every day. And at the end of the day, it's a cost effectiveness. It is getting that levelized cost of energy down so that you can get at least towards nuclear, even if you're not getting down to onshore or offshore wind. And so far, we've had 34 devices on our sites with 21 developers from 11 different countries. We hope to see our 35th device in the next few weeks. Some clients come for a few months. We've had clients though anywhere up to 10 years with their prototypes. And very quickly, one of certainly the largest floating tidal device in the world is currently on our site. This is Orbital Marine Power. They can generate a maximum of just over 2.8 2 megawatts. And they came on with this machine in July. This was built in Dundee. And about 500 meters away from them, we have a Spanish company, Magallanes Renewables. It's the second most powerful floating tidal device in the world, just under 2 megawatts. They've been on and off our site now for the last 4 years. They just had an upgrade and came back on in July. So if you're adding the two together, we are at peak. They could be generating up to 4 megawatts, which is pretty much our limit on our site. We've also got a wave energy device at the moment. This is Motion Energy's Blue X, which is on the Scapa Flow site. That's funded through Wave Energy Scotland, which has been putting something like £20 million into wave energy technology in Scotland over the last 3 or 4 years. And AWS, the ones that will be our 35th device on site shortly. So that's where we are. We're a wave and tidal energy company. So where did hydrogen come from? And it's really down to that 4 megawatt limit, which kicked things off about 4 or 5 years ago. Orkney has a ring main electrical grid. The main core zone is in the main part of Orkney, and then there's a ring main that goes out into a number of the islands, Shappensea, Stronsay, right up to Westray and back down again. On a very windy day, there is possibility that you would have to start switching off some of the wind farms because there is too much wind, and you get what is known as curtailed wind. So there's electricity that would have been generated but is lost because we've had to switch the machines off. And a lot of these turbines, they're community turbines, so it's really hitting the community really hard, having to switch these machines off right at the point when they could be making the most money. And to kind of give you an example of that, this was October 2017, and we mapped out the electricity demand versus the generation on Orkney. And you can see it was peaking there up at 35 megawatts, whereas the demand was really down at about 15 consistently, 10 to 20 across the whole of the month. But when the wind's not blowing, then obviously it dies right down. So we have this scenario where we go from way too much electricity to way too little. And what we would like to do is to try and smooth that out. We are fortunate that we have a link because it's part of the grid. We can export a certain amount south to mainland Scotland, but there are times when we have to start switching these things off and it's actually capped. Orkney has something called an active network management system that links all the turbines together and allows SSE to switch off as and when required. So why hydrogen? It's really it's a means to an end. Because we are generating so much more electricity, we have an opportunity to do something with it. And the idea with hydrogen is that you make hydrogen from the electricity, and then you can use that in other areas. And it was using power that would be lost, so it's almost free. And once produced, it's green hydrogen, so we can use it to decarbonize other energy-intensive applications. There was 5 that was kind of looked at: blending in gas networks, which is being looked at in a number of projects across the UK at the moment. A basic fuel for heating, hot water, cooking, that sort of thing, domestic side. Fuel for heavy duty use, could be buses, could be trains, all sorts of things. And then industrial feedstock and fuel for high grade process heat and engines. Or you could just turn it back into electricity again through a fuel cell. And Orkney being a group of islands, we can pretty much knock out blending in gas networks because we don't have a gas network. And we knocked out fuel for heating, hot water and cooking because most of Orkney is either electric or it's on bottled oil, bottled gas or oil. So we've been concentrating our projects on the bottom three. And what I'll be able to do is go through some of those examples for you in the next few slides. So what kicked it off were two projects that were initiated, I think, back in 2016, 2017. This was before I actually joined EMEC. But they were two separate but linked in fact that they were putting equipment onto Orkney, and we were able to demonstrate a full cycle of supply and demand in a small setting. So the surf and turf was looking at tide, wind and hydrogen. So it was based on the island of Edi, where we linked tidal turbines at our EMEC site with a community wind turbine, and they were linked on our site to a 0.5 megawatt PEM electrolyzer. That's a polymer electrolyte membrane, and it splits water. So you get oxygen and hydrogen, and is as green as it comes, really. We put hydrogen storage on site at 200 bar, and we have 200 bar trailers that take the hydrogen from Edi using one of the ferries across to Kirkwall, where it can be used in a 75 kilowatt fuel cell, or it can be used at the Hatston refueling station. The fuel cell is used to power ferries when they come in at night. It's something called cold ironing, which is becoming more and more popular. So instead of running diesel generators and polluting the town, then it's using clean electricity. And Orkney Island Council got hold of hydrogen vans, and so we have a refueling station that can be used to refuel the vans. And on the big hit system was looking at Shappensea, slightly bigger electrolyzer from the same company, ITM Power in Sheffield. This was being linked to a community wind turbine that was being curtailed. So that curtailed electricity would be used to generate the hydrogen. Another trailer would take it either to the school, where a hydrogen boiler is installed, or it too would go on one of the ferries and be brought to Kirkwall Harbour or to Hatston for the refueler. So it was two different projects, but what it was between the two of them were putting in the infrastructure to supply hydrogen and actually have a demand for it. Because when we kicked all this off back in 2016, there was no demand. There's no demand in Orkney. There was very little demand anywhere for it, to be honest. So we had to do both, and we had to be able to show that that Orkney could both use it and produce it at the same time. As demonstration projects, it's had its ups and downs. It took a while to get the equipment on site. It is very remote. Both islands only have 100, 200 people living on them. The expertise has to generally take 2 flights to get there and a ferry. And so it's just taken longer than I think we had hoped. But it's certainly demonstrated over the last few years that we are capable of doing this. And we'll be building up from there. This is what our Edi site looks like. We have an area on the right, which is electrical, and an area on the left, which is our hydrogen side. And the area on the right is the oldest part. But the electrolyzer, we've got 3 containers there in green. So it's, as we said, 0.5 megawatt, but we can get up to about 650 kilowatts, I think, at peak. This is actually our second electrolyzer. The first one was removed in 2019. It's supposed to have been replaced last year, but unfortunately COVID got in the way. But it's on site now and is just doing the electrical works as we speak, along with all the risk assessments and updating the ops manuals, and we'll be starting the ops and maintenance training early in the new year. In fact, it's going to have its leak test next week, and I think we've got the insurers coming over to do the checks for PED regulations. And that's installed by a company called ITM Power, based out in Sheffield. And we have our storage, so it's the original storage cylinders, but they've been given a repaint, and we've changed out some of the plumbing, but it's 200 bar storage. The original grid connection there, that's a 33 kV grid connection that links straight into the Orkney main, which is run by SSE, and then that hops across into our original substation that was built in about 2006. Step down to 11 kV at that point, and we have a 900 kilowatt community wind turbine that also now links into our site, and we have cables running up the beach from the tidal turbines, and we have a shed, an empty shed at the moment, which is going to contain a 1.5 megawatt flow cell battery system using a vanadium electrolyte. And the first of those batteries should be arriving at the end of this month, and we'll be commissioning it in the new year. What that's going to do is smooth out the peaks and troughs of our hydrogen production. Because if you link it to a tidal site, then obviously it's going to be, you've got tides going backwards and forwards twice a day, so there will be the slack time when there's no real generation going on. We have a community wind turbine, but we are only allowed to use the curtailed wind, and most of the time that's not the case. So what we can do is at peak times we can store energy in the flow cell battery, and we'll be able to generate the hydrogen, and then in the slack times we'll be able to continue generating hydrogen from the battery as we discharge the battery. So it's taken care of all the peaks and troughs that we would expect in offshore renewable energy of one sort or another. It means that we can provide the most cost-effective green hydrogen, and it kind of demonstrates that it can be done, and therefore you can take that idea and take it elsewhere. So I'll start talking about some of the projects that are ongoing. After the surf and turf and big hit projects, we kicked off another project called ITEG, run through ITEG Northwest Europe. So it was European funded, is also backed by the Scottish Government through the Highland and Island Enterprise. And it's a collaborative project with a number of different companies. Orbital Marine Power to help put a new tidal device on our site, which is the one that arrived this summer. And a company called Arriva H2 Gen, who have just changed their name to Elogen. They will be providing a second electrolyzer on our site, just adjacent to the one that was installed this year. It's the same sort of size, it's about 0.5 megawatt, but it can go up to 1 megawatt peak production for short periods of time. This project it's linking everything together. We're working with universities as well, because they will be doing a lot of analysis of all the data that comes out. And really what it's doing is it's linking the orbital 2 megawatt turbine to the PEM electrolyzer using a smart energy management system that will be optimizing the export of energy. It'll either be going to the grid or going to the electrolyzer at the best possible moment. And then obviously we get the green hydrogen. And really, as far as the EU goes, it's really all about reducing the amount of CO2. So we're going to put this electricity to use either in the national grid or by generating green hydrogen. And this project will come to the end at the end of next year. And I want to talk to a couple of projects looking at decarbonising the ferry fleet in Orkney. It is the biggest polluter, if you like, or certainly the biggest generator of carbon dioxide in the islands, simply because the islands are very green. They have a lot of green electricity. The first project that we looked at was called High Dime, and it was looking at putting a hydrogen and diesel injection system into the ferry. And I think this ferry was the one that was shown on, I think, ITV last week. If you happen to see the program about Orkney, then you would have seen them on the ferry along some of the other projects that they were looking at. This was the first time that we were really looking to do this, and the biggest issue that we had was the regulatory barriers, because there were no regulations for the use of hydrogen on ferries. So what we'd hoped to do was put a hydrogen storage on and run the engine. We were able to show that we could put the equipment on, but unfortunately the project ran out of time and we were unable actually to demonstrate it actually happening. It became a bit of a surprise to us. We thought we would have been able to get the regulations sorted out sooner, but we misjudged that. And I think so did everybody else in the project, and working with the NCA and others, that it was actually going to be a little bit more difficult than what we thought. Limited to the number of passengers that you can have on the ferries when we have hydrogen on board. And we don't want to restrict the number of passengers on these ferries because they are completely dependent on being able to get on a ferry as and when required. But we got a lot of useful learning out it. It was certainly worth doing the project. It's now just complete. But by far the biggest learning was on the regulatory barriers. So we have a new project which we just kicked off in September, that is taking the learning from High Dime and taking it one step further. And again, it's all about taking the hydrogen that we produce on ED and doing something useful with it. So we are getting a hydrogen engine built at the Hatston Pier next to the cruise terminal. And so the heating and the power will come from the engine. We are doing some studies on how we can electrify the pier completely at Kirkwall and at Shappensea, the island that the ferry goes to. And then onboard demonstration of the hydrogen storage and fuel cell auxiliary power. That is the main part of the project. It's a very short project. It's only 7 or 8 months long. It will finish at the end of March. And then we will be able to tell everybody what we learned from that project. Again, it's a collaborative project, a number of different companies that we're working with, along with Orkney Island Council support and funded through the Department for Transport. And in fact, yesterday, the Department for Transport announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that they were, the money that they had put into this fund is now going to be extended to a much larger fund going forward. So there may be a HIMEC 2, you never know. We're still in the procurement stage here. So we've procured the engine, we're procuring storage, etc., for use in the new year. But this is a very fast track project, and really good luck to everybody who's working on this project. So it's not just the ferries that we're working with. There's 2 other examples that we've got here. The first one is with Highland and Island Airport, namely at Kirkwall. They are being very innovative in their decarbonisation of their airports. We have supplied them with a combined heat and power hydrogen engine that we got through Doosan Babcock in Glasgow, and their link with a German company, 2G. So Doosan have been project managing and doing a lot of the engineering and safety studies, etc. And 2G provided the engine. So that you can actually see that at Kirkwall Airport if you go there. It's being linked into the heat system as we speak, and we are organising the mechanical and the electrical side of it again for commissioning, probably just in the new year. Christmas is just getting a little bit too close now, and the weather in Orkney in December is particularly good, so we're pushing a number of these things out into the new year. But we've also been working with the likes of Highland Park and Orkney Distilleries and Edinburgh Napier University over doing the technical feasibility on using hydrogen-fueled steam systems for for decarbonising the distilleries. Excuse me. And so these are really quite interesting projects. There's so many different things that you can do with using hydrogen as a fuel, and so many companies want to decarbonise their systems, and hydrogen is really looking like a potential solution. Another area that we've got into is supplying green hydrogen for aviation. It's a project we kicked off a couple of years ago with a company called ZeroAvia, funded by Innovate UK, called High Flyer project. What ZeroAvia were doing, this is an American company, was they were putting a hydrogen-powered fuel cell into an 8-seater aircraft to demonstrate that you can in fact power aircraft using hydrogen supply. And they were very successful with that, such that they were able to go on to a much bigger project called High Flyer 2, which we kicked off last year. So what EMEC produces, as you can see in the picture there, our hydrogen van, that's our hydrogen refueler, and we have a mobile electrolyzer as well. It's a very small scale. At the moment, it's 4 kilograms a day is all that we supply. But we are going to upgrade it to 10 kilograms a day, hopefully by the end of this year. And this is currently sitting in a place called Kemble, called Cotswolds Airport. It used to be RAF Kemble, and ZeroAvia have just got a much larger 35-seat aircraft. I think it's a Dornier or something like that, which they're going to do the conversion on that. There is a link to Orkney in as much as Orkney has some very small 8-seater aircraft, Britain-Norman Islanders, which might be well suited for hydrogen power, simply because these are very short flights. They're only 15 to 30-minute flights. You don't tend to fly very high, and it'd be fairly quick to refuel from the likes of the airport at Edy, near our test site. So we're all very excited about this. While I was at COP yesterday, I was at the Green Zone, and there was a hydrogen double-decker bus from Wright Bus, and they'd actually stopped at Kemble on the way up from London to refuel using our refueler. So it's nice to be able to talk to them yesterday about how they got on. It's a very easy refueling system that pretty much anybody can use. Alongside High Flyer 1 and High Flyer 2, there is the SATE project. Again, this is being run at Kirkwall Airport by HIA, all part of their decarbonisation, and they've been looking at electric aircraft, and we are looking at the potential for hydrogen aviation, and we are hoping at some point that we might be able to get the ZeroAvia aircraft up on site, but to do that we need to be able to demonstrate that we can supply them with hydrogen once they get up here. You may have seen on the UK news a few weeks ago that the post office had an unmanned drone that they were flying from Kirkwall out to one of the islands to deliver mail. That was being funded through this SATE project as well. So there's a lot of innovative projects that are being done at the moment at HIA at Kirkwall Airport, and it really kind of demonstrates that Orkney itself is really just a kind of living laboratory. There's so much demonstration work getting done in all sorts of renewable fields, It's really great fun. And if you ever get the opportunity to go, take it, because there's so much to see. Briefly cover a few others. I won't cover every hydrogen project because we have so many at the moment, but we are working with floating wind developers who are looking at what they can do with their curtailed wind, integrating floating wind and hydrogen. And we're also, we've been working with the Scottish and French governments and two French developers about a similar sort of thing, offshore hydrogen production solutions. And because this has been ongoing now for a number of years, we get asked to join projects so that we can tell the Orkney story elsewhere. So other islands that won't necessarily want to replicate the whole thing, but they would like to replicate aspects of what Orkney's been doing, or just learning from mistakes or what hasn't worked. Because part of doing our demonstration projects is learning what not to do rather than just what to do. So Malta got involved via the Big Hit project. There's an island called Borkum in Germany where they're running a big decarbonisation project called Islander, and we're working with them on that. And a similar thing with Mallorca on something called Green Highland Project, and even very large projects like the one in the Netherlands, which is something like €100 million project, where we're getting involved in telling the Orkney hydrogen story and see what learning we can get from there. And it's really interesting to see other islands going down a similar sort of journey to what we're doing in Orkney. And we do try to influence innovation policy as well. We spend a lot of time with Scottish government, who are really big in the hydrogen space, and with, as I mentioned before, with France as well. And we did a small study for them, looking at what we could possibly do, what the technical challenges are, looking at the bilateral policy landscapes of working jointly between Scotland and France. What a stakeholder engagement. We do a huge amount of stakeholder engagement within EMEC. We have a very, very busy marketing and PR department. And a lot of these studies that we do, it's recommendations for future collaboration. We may step away at some point because the projects might just get too big, and there might not be an angle for Orkney, particularly if it's things like putting hydrogen gas into the gas network, because we don't have a gas network on Orkney. As I mentioned before, the regulations are vital in keeping the activities safe. And I think I said earlier in one of our projects, we didn't get to the final destination on the project simply because of the regulatory approvals. And as an example of what we had to go through, you start off with the hazard identification meetings, and then the hazard operations meeting, the HAZOPs. We didn't engage the MCA fully. So even though we started going through the retrofitting, the MCA had objections. All sorts of discussions going on about type approval. And there's a whole bunch of drama and problem solving went on. We did a lot of what you call bow tie risk assessments, looking at the barriers to all the risks. And then we finished up doing task-based HAZOPs at the end. And then we were able to issue a whole bunch of trial documents, but we didn't quite get to that sea trial. But trial documents in themselves and a few other bits and pieces as well, which I'll go on to, have really been beneficial. But it's not plain sailing. It certainly hasn't been. So what we've got really is kind of three main focus areas. Regulatory evolution, which I've talked about. Equipment, technical solutions, again, which I've mentioned some of these before, but there's also training and working practices. So people have to use something that could be dangerous to use if you don't use it correctly, but they've never used it before. So we've been working with a number of different institutes on the training and getting the operations manuals, etc., and emergency response procedures up and running. So basically our hydrogen R&D program is producing hydrogen, green hydrogen via electrolysis using tidal and wind energy. We've been able to demonstrate that you can store it at reasonably high pressures. For us, it's 200 bar, and that can be handled safely using our dispensers. And then it's been looking at, once you've got hydrogen, you've got to do something with it. So what will be our hydrogen use cases? And it's really about this decarbonisation of Orkney and beyond. So whether that's in transport, likes of vans, ferries and airplanes, industrial heat, where we've been looking at the distilling, either in the whiskey and gin, and at the moment providing auxiliary power at quayside, but obviously with that final goal of actually being able to run hydrogen on the ferries themselves. Wouldn't be an IOSH presentation if we didn't mention safety. And safety is at the heart of EMEC. We run a very detailed permit to work system for our own works and permit to access system for our clients coming on site. We've brought together a number of expert companies in designing safe technical solutions. The gas trailers are all ATEX and because they're on the road, ADR certified. In fact, our trailers are going through ADR certification as we speak. We've standardized the quick connectors using the best that we can find, and we've now got these innovative designs for storage below deck. But as I mentioned before, training is a really big part of things now. We actually set up training with the University of Highland Islands at the Orkney College, where we were bringing seamen from the ferries, and we were showing them how to use our equipment if for any reason it needed to be handled on a ferry, or just what to do if there was some sort of incident and they needed to move the trailers safely. Excuse me. So we were focusing on the hydrogen handling and bunkering, and these have been very, very successful. Training courses using our own personnel as well as Orkney College. So that's really, I wanted to give you a flavour of what we're up to. Just very quickly, what are we hoping to do next? Some of you may have seen an announcement by a company called Total Energies, French company. Their CEO came to Aberdeen to make a big announcement about his consortium that was looking at an offshore wind site to the west of Orkney, and not just linking that into the national grid, but linking into the Flotta oil terminal to turn it into the Flotta hydrogen hub. This is what we're hoping it's going to look like, and we are kind of the local contact along with OIC and others with the consortium. So they would build a new electrical substation and new hydrogen infrastructure. It's all predicated on getting consent for the offshore wind system. So this is Offshore Wind Power Limited. It's backed by the Green Investment Group and the Ridge Renewable Infrastructure Development Group, Total Energy. So that development proposal has gone to the UK government for approval. So fingers crossed. So I guess finally, just to try and kind of sum things up a bit, then we focus on reducing time, cost and risk with not just marine developments now, but clean energy technology. And it is learning through doing. You know, we will put the things in the wrong order. We will we will make mistakes in what we're doing, but we will learn from them, and that's exactly what we are doing. As I mentioned, we're a bit of a living laboratory in Orkney, but what we're trying to do is work with as many companies as we can to generate the data and produce models to enhance the understanding, and hopefully at the end bring marine energy and green hydrogen down to the cost that it needs to be competitive. And along with that, informing future regulatory standardization and health and safety regimes. And I think my last slide, really, collaboration is the key here. We work with hundreds of different companies and stakeholders around Scotland, around the UK, around Europe, around the world. Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, for example, DNV, working with very strongly at the moment. We have universities, we have groups like the Highland and Islands Airport, as well as suppliers of equipment, etc. So I think I would like to say thank you very much for listening to me today, and I would be delighted to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That was really informative. It's not an industry that I have typically had any exposure in, so I find that really, really interesting. So thank you very much. What I'll do just now is hand over to Gordon Douglas, who is going to facilitate the Q&A. I think we have got some questions in there already, so I'll hand over to Gordon.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, Gordon.
Yes, okay. There's quite a few questions come in so far. I'll just read out the first one from Stanley Igbenabor. Sorry if I've made a mess of your name there. Question is, with a big push from oil and gas industry to lobby the government on blue hydrogen, how are you, or the green hydrogen champions, countering them in order to get your message across to the government that green hydrogen is indeed the way to go?
I think we've looked at kind of two different areas. One is that we demonstrate that green hydrogen works, and in the second area, really, it is making sure that our voice is heard at government level. So there was a lot of lobbying done with ourselves and our partners. We had Boris Johnson on our site last year. We were able to show him exactly what we could do. And Orkney was then mentioned in the decarbonisation of the maritime industry along with Teesside. The only reason Orkney was really mentioned is because of the stakeholders in Orkney that was doing the lobbying to get him there in the first place. So it's kind of the show people what we can do, but also doing a lot of the lobbying to force our message across.
Okay. Second question, Robert Francis has asked, with the latest Toyota hydrogen car, the Mirai, coming on at just a couple of quid under 50 grand, it's expensive when compared to its EV rivals. Range is only marginally better than EVs at 400 per tank. Space inside is limited. According to latest figures, there are only 14 filling stations that you could fuel up in. Where do you see the personal car vehicle going with hydrogen? And will they pursue it or just focus on bigger projects and leave cars to full EV?
Yeah, I haven't really spoken to the car manufacturers, so I'm not really sure how that's going to progress. They are very expensive. They're quite nice as well. I have been in one. But talking to JCB yesterday, for example, their general manager, they've got hydrogen refuelers and they've got hydrogen engines now in a lot of their equipment. And talking to Wrightbus yesterday, they've got their buses. And both companies were saying that really, if you've got equipment on site 12 hours a day, running back and forward to charge your battery isn't really the way to go, whereas they both feel that hydrogen is the way to go. So for the kind of the heavy duty, I think lorries and equipment, I think there's a good potential there.
Okay. Graham Marek has said, America has been running many large 4x4 vehicles on hydrogen for many years. When can you foresee the UK going away from NiCad and lithium car batteries, which are not very economically friendly to produce, and move over to hydrogen vehicles? I think that's pretty much a similar story, is it?
I think it's very much so. I think what we have to do is to be able to supply the hydrogen. And once the supply is in enough volume, then the manufacturers will be able to manufacture in a volume to keep the price down. It's very much a chicken and egg. It's definitely what's come out of COP this week, is that there are so many players ready to go. They just need to be able to get hold of the hydrogen in the first place. The companies building the hydrogen need to be sure that they've got someone to sell it to if they go and spend billions of pounds building up the hydrogen infrastructure. But it is definitely happening. There are plants now being built. There are vehicles available. We have our mobile refueler refueling a bus simply because it just happened to be in the right place at the right time. That will definitely improve, I think, over the next 5 years or so.
That kind of ties in with the next question. Please, how can we relate this with the COP26 ongoing in Scotland? And it's just basically legislation and regulators you're talking about, is it?
That's been part of it, that funding as well, funding to get the infrastructure in place. I mean, there is going to be a huge cost to that. We see it on the electric side. There's not enough electric charges for cars. Never mind trying to find a hydrogen refueler as well.
Yeah.
Although I did see an advert on television the other day, and I can't remember what breakdown company it was, but this was on ITV, I guess. They were advertising that some of their breakdown vehicles had hydrogen on it, so that if your hydrogen car ran out between stops, you could get refueled by them.
All right. So there seems to be a lot more going on in the background that we're actually aware of.
There's a huge amount going on in the background. Yeah, and it was really good to see it this week in Glasgow.
Yeah. The next question is about the efficiency of hydrogen. Will it be better than fossil fuels and liquid natural gas?
I think, well, hydrogen, I guess, is slightly unique in what it is, just the fact that being a gas, it's not so easy to transport as a liquid. And liquefying it, you'd have to get it very cold, and just being able to maintain it at those very low temperatures will make it quite difficult. I think if you look at kilogram per kilogram to fossil fuels, it is a lot more expensive. But if you take in the fact that you have to then clean the atmosphere afterwards, they're probably a lot closer. And the price of green hydrogen will come down very, very quickly over the next 5 or 10 years, the same way that offshore wind came down, once it gets to scale.
Yeah, the next question is, what sort of time scale to develop and build the infrastructure using hydrogen as a major source of energy?
I think if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd have probably said 10 years or so, but I think it's going to be quicker now. I think I was really pleased at the messages that were coming out of Glasgow in the last 2 weeks about green hydrogen as a big solution to the problem.
Yeah. The next question is an interesting one. The Orkney service bus fleet is currently being replaced by about 30 diesel-powered buses. Was this a missed opportunity for hydrogen power? One word answer?
Yes.
Okay. Question here, how safe is green hydrogen in terms of flammability and transportation in vans, tankers, aircraft, etc., and any specific safety measures that need to be taken?
Well, you have to handle it in the same way of any other explosive gas. So it is safe when it's being handled correctly. You just must follow the rules very, very carefully. Because we're not used to it, because you can't see it, you can't smell it. It's even when it's burning, you can get very, very close to it before you feel it. So you have to bear all that in mind. And as I said, we run a very strict permit to work system on our sites. The companies that transport it for us are all ADR trained and certified. we take it very, very seriously, the safety, because if anything goes wrong, it could put back the hydrogen for years if we're not careful.
Oh, yeah. Is it worth putting an odorizer or some sort of visual dye into it? Would that work?
It might well do. I think companies are thinking about that. I think particularly if it goes into the domestic supply, for example.
And would that then have an effect on the environment, or would you obviously be looking at that?
Well, I guess it would be, I mean, at the moment, I would have thought it'd be very similar to what goes into natural gas. But we've talked about it, but we haven't got as far as going into the detail of it yet. But it's certainly something that we are considering.
Okay. There's a couple of questions that you've already answered there, I think. Do you think it'll be tough to convince areas with no renewable energy curtailment to move to green hydrogen?
Well, I suppose if they don't have to produce, if it's been produced elsewhere, then all we're doing is it'll be supplied to them as and when they require it. So I guess the companies that supply propane and butane or supply oil in tankers will be now looking at how they can supply green hydrogen. And we know we're not a logistics company. That's not what we're about. We're demonstrating the whole package. We would leave it up to them to decide the best way to move it around.
One of the questions we've had in here that I've made scribbles about is why is there so little mention of tidal power at COP26 when there's a big push on for wind turbines?
Yeah. Well, we've certainly been shouting about it as much as we can. Boris Johnson mentioned it in Parliament the other day, I think for the first time. Certainly our marketing department were all over that when we heard. There is the potential there, but I guess because you can go and build a 3 gigawatt offshore wind development relatively quickly and relatively cheaply compared to tidal, and we're just not quite there yet. But we now have 2 megawatt tidal devices. That's where we were with wind not that long ago. They're going to get bigger. They're going to get cheaper. It's really just a matter of time now. Right.
Okay. Looking through this, I'm thinking that that's the bulk of the questions so far that I can see on my screen. Okay, I'll pass you back to Gillian then.
Thanks, Gordon.
Okay.
That's lovely. Thank you very much for that, both. Much appreciated, and for answering the questions as clearly and concisely as you did, Jonathan. It's much appreciated. I have no further updates to give at the present, so I would just like to say thanks again to Jonathan for talking to us today, and to Gordon and Anthony for facilitating the Q&A. It was a really informative session, and the feedback that we've had in the chat from those attending has been particularly positive. We've managed to reach all across this beautiful little orb of ours. So thank you again very much. And in closing, thanks for joining us all today. Please check our branch microsite, LinkedIn page, and other IOSH communications for future branch events. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for attending, everybody. Thank you for listening.